Yes, namaste. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Reconstructing Hindu History, Restoring India's Place in the Global Narrative. And so there's so much in this subject, and I'm so glad to have all of you with us today. And we have Dr. Raj Vedam, the wonderful, multi-talented faculty and intellectual. But just for some background, we know that the dominant narrative of world history has been shaped through a Eurocentric lens that often overlooked or deliberately minimized the profound contribution and contributions of ancient Indian civilization, the Bharati civilization. In the 19th century, as colonial powers began writing history to suit their worldview, Hindu civilization was reframed as derivative, its intellectual achievements obscured or erased. And there's a lot of history here that needs to be reconstructed. It's missing, and that's where Dr. Raj Vedam fits in. And it's really eye-opening when you really critically examine how world history came to be constructed and how India's role and Hindus' role was systematically diminished in the process. And so Dr. Raj Vedam draws from a range of disciplines, including archaeology, linguistics, astronomy, mathematics, and Dr. Vedam traces the true scope of India's contributions to global knowledge systems and is really at the forefront of exposing the colonial era distortions that continue to shape historical narratives. So, with that, let me introduce Dr. Raj Vedam. He's actually an electrical engineer. Got a master's degree in electrical engineering from the from Indian Institute of Science in Bengaluru. He's also got a PhD in electrical engineering from Oregon State University. He has over 26 years now. I think now it's decades of
Suddenly
experience
changed.
in uh, power, electronic, and other systems. But it's really his I don't know if it's his next. It was more than a hobby, right? It's become something that has become he like he's a leader in the entire field and working at the confluence of so many different interdisciplinary fields like mathematics, engineering, computer science, archaeogenetics, archaeoastronomy, archaeology, and bringing that all together to really put forward a strong thesis with the facts of the antiquity of the Indian of the Hindu civilization. So he's delivered so many lectures and talks. He's taught this course several times at HUA. It's a tandem course. He's doing retreats. The astronomy retreat I heard that you taught was amazing. The astronomy, ancient Indian astronomy course, another amazing project that we're able to that we're proud to have hosted at HUA and with Dr. Raj Vedam. So with that, let me hand it to Dr. Vedam to get us started with today's webinar.
Thank you, Ankur. That is a great introduction. So let me share my screen. Tell me if you can see my screen.
Yes.
Wonderful. So let me hide away these controls over here. Give me just a second. Okay, so give me just a second here. Yes. So we're talking about the historicity of Indian knowledge systems. And this is what the course is all about. When we talk about Indian knowledge systems, yes, there are a lot of experts who will talk to you about deep mathematics, medicine, astronomy, philosophy, and all of these kind of things. But what is lacking in our narratives is the historicity of the tradition. If we don't understand the historicity of the tradition, we'll be kicked around by anybody who's got some kind of a beef in this game and wants to do something or the other about it, right? So we need to understand historicity. So I offer several courses here at Hindu University of America. So the newest one is this History and Methods of Indian Astronomy, which will go into the third iteration now. And these two courses are in their fifth iteration now. So we've had the chance to introduce them and revise them. With every iteration, we keep revising because the data keeps coming in, newer data comes in, and we're able to incorporate all of those things. So in the first part, on reconstructing Hindu history, we talk about the people who have corrupted the history of India. I'll briefly touch on that in today's seminar. And in the upcoming course for which this webinar has been set up is the omissions. What is it in Indian knowledge systems that is not accounted for in the world narratives? That is what we will handle in this 10 lecture series. So you might wonder, why even bother with this course? Why should we study the historicity of IKS? I mean, world's a happy place. Why do you even bother with it? Well, unfortunately, there's a whole lot of players over here who have messed around with the narrative of the Indian history, right? So we see even a random sampling. I've taken the Quanta magazine, which is a magazine that works to popularize mathematics in public imagination. And this is from the 2025, May 15th. You see, even in an article on geometry, the first person they talk about is Euclid in ancient Greece. And from there on, jump to 19th century to Einstein. If you were to take even Google's Gemini AI summary and ask for history of sciences, it comes out with this. It says early roots are in ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, mathematical systems, astronomy, medicine. From there it jumps to Greece. And from Greece it goes to Byzantine Empire. And from there to Western Europe, Renaissance. Wikipedia, don't have to ask about it, right? Everybody knows that. Look at the history of science. It says it can be traced to Egypt, Mesopotamia, and from there and all these fields influence the later Greeks, the Byzantines, and through the Muslims, it preserves, this knowledge is preserved by the Muslims, and then it leads to Renaissance. So this is the worldview that has been constructed lovingly by a whole lot of Eurocentric scholars, and this is taught everywhere. Everywhere the same story. And we had to scratch our heads a bit and ask, is this all there is to it? Where is India in the Western narrative? And we get an idea from some of the professors who have worked diligently to try to erase the Indian contributions. Over here, I give you the example of a professor called David Pingree, who was in New York. He passed away in 2005. He worked on the history of astronomy and other such things. And here is a paper by him on Indian astronomy in 1977. And he says, for example, there are excerpts from his paper here. In India, astronomers paid little attention to observation or theory. That's an allegation. That means our astronomers and scientists neither observed nor bother about the theory of why things are the way they are. But the evidence that we have shows the exact opposite. One more statement. He says, mathematical astronomy was introduced into India, implying it has come from the West, somewhere from the West, along the sciences of divination from the West. The exact opposite is true. You will have to take this course to look at all the evidences on which I make this assertion. It's not an easy assertion, right? We have a body of evidence that will show all of these kind of things. And he talks about, for example, Akkadian sources, Jyotisha, Vedanga Jyotisha, which is composed in northwestern India by Lagadha in the late 5th or early 4th century BCE. This unfortunately flies in the face of the internal evidence of Vedanga Jyotisha itself, from which we can show this text was composed in 1400 BCE. And I show in this course how exactly you can bring out such dates out of the text over there. And so on. One more of these outrageous statements. He says, the preservation of Greek knowledge is one of India's greatest contribution to the history of science. What does he mean by this? He means that, yes, the Greeks had a lot of knowledge, which they introduced into India. And after that, the Greek Empire was destroyed by the Christians, early Christians, and the Muslims had preserved it, and the Indians had preserved it. So today, if we study Indian astronomy, we know exactly what Greek astronomy is all about. That is the statement he's making here. It's outrageous. It is a mindless and shameful Eurocentrism. And we will provide the proofs. These are not jingoistic statements. We'll provide the proof and evidence for each of these things in this course. In this short webinar, we can't cover much, but it'll give you a flavor for some of these things. So the first question to ask is, why? Who did all of these things? Why do they do all of these things? That's a question, right? So this unsatisfactory historiography of India, this is what we're concerned about. This is covered in the first part of this lecture series, which was not needed for the second part, by the way, but these two go as a whole. So we see in the first course that there are five agencies: the colonials, Eurocentric, the missionaries, the socialist academia, and the Marxists. These agencies have hijacked the history of India, they've imposed their ideologies on it, and it has led to a subversion of our identities in the present. So it has led to enormous distortion of Indian history and identity. The colonial people, for example, they believed in 1700s that God created the world in 4004 BCE, destroyed the world, Noah's flood in 2500 BCE, and all of human history follows from Noah's progeny. But when they came to India and encountered the Puranic literature that shows great antiquity in astronomy and so on, they couldn't take it. So they said that all of Indian history is nonsense. We need to correct it and make sure it complies with biblical history. So they introduced a set of distortions. Then they noticed that Sanskrit, Latin, and Greek are related. And why are they related? In order to address that question, a whole lot of Eurocentric notions came about. The field of linguistics was born 1800s, 17 to 1800s, and they proposed there's an ancestral language called Proto-Indo-European, PIE, whose speakers were in Central Asia between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. And these people, once they had domesticated the wild horse and they got iron swords and built chariots and things of this nature, they were able to go to the west and occupy Ukraine, became the Western Europeans. They came to the east later on and became the Aryans who invaded India. So those kind of notions came about. The missionaries, they were always interested in converting, right? So they landed in southern India initially, and they wanted to convert the southern Indians to Christianity. And one way to do that was the translations of the Vedic literature. They were at the forefront of taking the Vedic literature and translating them into European languages. They had a vested interest in showing that Indians are backward, primitive, superstitious, stagnant, and horrendous society, right? With very bad practices and so on, which needs the light of Christianity to save these people. So they brought about another set of biases. When India got independence in 1947, Nehruvian socialism took over. And they believed that all of the past is retrogressive and the past must be thrown away for progress in the future. And the only way to get a classless utopian society is by destroying Hinduism. So they work within the constitution to bring about a whole lot of laws and things like that to stifle the practice of Hinduism, which continues to the present day. The Marxists, since 1972, they entered the political picture in India thanks to Indira Gandhi, and they only wanted the education sector, the HRD sector, as their pound of flesh for supporting Indira Gandhi in the parliament. So they introduced another set of distortions that of oppressor oppressed. That's the kind of narrative that they introduced in order to look at all of Indian social dynamics. To them, all of history is a history of class conflicts, right? So the only way you can analyze the Indian social order is by looking at it through the prism of conflict. And that continues to the present day. So these distortions have completely perverted our identity, our history, and every aspect of who we are. And this is where we are. If we understand this, then we can slowly unravel their propaganda, their ideologies, and try to see where is the truth. This we do in the first course that just got over. And there we show that colonial hegemony, people like the Portuguese, Dutch, French, British, hand in hand with Christian imperialism, people like Caldwell, Pope, and others, along with Eurocentric scholars like Max Muller, Risley, and others, with using linguistics, anthropology, caste, and all of these things, with convergent ideologies, they have impacted our identity, who we are as a people. What is central to that narrative is that there's something called Aryan invasion, 1500 BCE, Aryan invasion. That is the centerpiece of the theory from which everything emanates. All the distortions emanate from the central idea over here. And these, unfortunately, are continued to the present day. Our present day scholars take whatever the colonialists have done as received wisdom. They don't question it. Unquestioningly, they take everything and they continue with all of the distortions that they have introduced. They also harness archaeology, trying to bend it towards their theories, including today genetics is used in order to try and support the theories that they have earlier over here. These are not independent fields of study today because the results are being subverted to support this established received wisdom of the colonialists. That is why we see there are circular dependencies, questionable assumptions, and they continue to impact who we are as a people. That continues to be impacted. So, in this entire two-part course, I have introduced an evidence-based history study over here. I have introduced, I pioneered a model-based analysis of claims. So whenever we see somebody coming with a claim, the first question we ask is, on what basis did you make the claim? What was your model? What was the methodology? What was the data that you have? What is the processes you followed? What are the claims that emanate from your process? So we examine everything here. What are the assumptions in your model? What are the constraints? How much can you push your model before it gives wrong results? These analytical questions are important for scientists, and we approach this with a scientific point of view. And we take a look at this and say there's so much of data for history in India, and so many models, linguistic model, archaeology model, genetics, astronomy. So I introduce all of these models, including the assumptions that went into building these models, look at the data that we used for these models. We look at the provenance of the data, the high quality, medium quality, low quality data. We look at all of these things. We examine the methodologies, look at the applicability of the methodologies. We look at the claims, and then we say, is this valid or is it not? So this is the way we make a systematic study out of an opinion-based field, right? Earlier it was propaganda, it was ideologies imposed on the Indian civilization. Those were opinions. So here we are saying, where are the facts? Where is the evidence? So we have changed everything out to an analytical way of studying these things, the way an engineer scientist like me would approach this field. So this is part of what we do over here. And the question you can ask is, why do we bother? I mean, let them say what they want, Aryan invasion and all those things. Why do we care, right? Well, this impacts us pervasively in our identity. This false narrative that there was an invasion or a migration of Aryans in 1500 BCE, they say these illiterate nomads, illiterate because they didn't have a script, they had an oral tradition. These illiterate nomads from Central Asia, they destroyed a superior civilization. Who was that? Harappa. They destroyed a superior civilization, and they were running around in India with caste, cow, curry, and all this nonsense, including sati, child marriage, backwardness, primitive, superstitious, all these kind of nonsense. They were running around, and India had to wait for 1,000 years before civilization returned to Magadha. This is not my line. This is from NCERT textbook, standard 11. Straight from that I picked this line. India had to wait for 1,000 years before the Greeks, Alexandrian Greeks, 300 BCE, made contact with Magadha. Suddenly we got the Brahmi script, right? And we got Ashokan pillar, writings and all these things. We became civilized. Overnight we became civilized, according to them. Then they say, yours is a young civilization. You have not had enough gestation time to generate knowledge in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and all these areas. Therefore, if you got some superior text like Shushruta Samhita, like Surya Siddhanta and other such works, you must have copied it from the earlier civilizations like the Babylonians, the Greeks, and so on. So you see how this narrative works? It's insidious. The way this narrative works, it undermines your ancestors, it undermines your accomplishments, it imposes a false narrative on a civilization, and then pulls a rug from under us, saying that none of these things are yours. It has come from outside because you're a young civilization. So in this narrative, they say Aryans brought Sanskrit into India from Levant, right? Central Asia. Brahmi came from the Aramaic script, which is a Semitic script, from Israel, a Levant area, into India. Mathematics and sciences came from Greece, astronomy from Babylon. Turkic Muslims, they got us culture, cuisine, architecture, music, civilization. And the British, they got us science, technology, rational thought. Even bhakti was taught to us by Saint Thomas, a love of divinity, who landed in Muziris in Kerala and got us this thing. So these are the kind of distortions that we see. The adhikara has been taken away from us, right? Narratives are set by outsiders and they are imposed on us. This is what we see. So we have to ask, is this correct? Is this real? What does the evidence say? These are the questions that we address. In the first course, we went systematically looking model by model and trying to show how the linguistics model is utterly incorrect. And so many other models are showing the antiquity of the Indian civilization. Having established antiquity, the second part, yes, so in the first course, this is what we did. We had a model evidence-based rational examination of all these claims from what I call enforced historiography. This model-based analysis, which I pioneered, this one we use textual evidence, archaeological evidence, genetics, climatology, geology, astronomy, and several other models. And we see where the antiquity of the Indian civilization is. And we show this great antiquity. Having done that, we say now that yes, India is not a recent civilization. It's a pretty ancient civilization. So we have to ask the second question. If it is an ancient civilization, is there evidence of accumulation of knowledge? Because this is what we expect a civilization to do, right? We expect accumulation of knowledge in various fields. Is such an evidence in India? Because we have been told that we did not even have a formal knowledge generation system. We were, after all, superstitious, backward, primitive, and the British are the ones who taught us rational thought. So, is there evidence? That's the first question to ask itself. So, what we see is that yes, we have a well-defined epistemology. So we can show that the earliest knowledge sources are classified today as the Shruti literature and the Smriti literature. Shruti is that which is heard, typically an oral tradition, very, very ancient. The Vedas, Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads, these fall under this category. The Smriti literature, typically that is written down and that is remembered. Look at the script, it makes some meaning in your mind, so it's remembered. So these are the 6 Vedangas: grammar, meter, astronomy, itihasas, texts on dharma, artha, kama, moksha, Puranas, kavyas, bhashyas. All of these things fall under the Smriti literature. What you're seeing here is an enormous matrix of knowledge systems that is available in India, where anybody could find intellectual fulfillment. Depending on your persuasion, you could find fulfillment in any of these areas. And if you look at the epistemology, evidence of our ancient philosophical systems that we call the darshanas today. So we have, for example, Nyaya. Nyaya Darshana, these are the one-line statements that show the essence of these schools. All knowledge is not intrinsically valid. Most knowledge is not valid unless proven. Truth exists whether we human beings know it or not. The Rishi Akshapada Gautama is credited with these things. So very logical way of analyzing the reality and phenomena around us. That is what Nyaya Darshana teaches us. Yoga, Patanjali, we know, codified then as Ashtanga Yoga, which is the bedrock of what we call Sanatana Dharma today, right? Yoga is the key area in which we see our connection with Brahman. Vaisheshika, Rishi Kannada, which works on perception and inference. This is the basis of our scientific approach today. Everything is based on perception and inference, and we can thank Rishi Kannada and Vaisheshika for that. Samkhya, the oldest tradition we have by Rishi Kapila, worked on systematic enumeration and rational examination of the facts. Purva Mimamsa, Kumarila Bhatta worked on reflection, consideration, profound thought, investigation, examination, discussion, all these profound ways of doing these things. Uttara Mimamsa or Vedanta, there are up to 10 schools. I've only put Adi Shankara for Advaita over here. So what is clear is we have very well defined philosophies over here, epistemology. Furthermore, we need to understand how did ancient Indians accept something as valid? What is something that's valid? If I come and make an assertion that the sun will rise in the west, that is an assertion. How is it true? On what basis do I claim that, right? That is Pramana. Pramana is our means of saying that this is valid, right? So we have Pratyaksha, Anumana, perception, inference, comparison, analogy, postulation, derivation of circumstances, non-perception, negative proof, Shabda Pramana, relying on word of experts. And each of these darshanas only differs in what was exalted as a valid means for knowledge, right? So for example, the traditional atheists in India were Charvakas, and they said, we reject the Vedas, reject Shabda Pramana, anybody can say anything, reject all those things, only my experience. If I see it, if I experience it, that is true, nothing else is true. The Buddhists, they took Vaisheshika, perception and inference alone. And by the time you come to Mimamsa and Advaita, you're seeing that taking just about everything. So the sampradayas that we call Buddhism, Jainism, Dvaita, the differences are very minimal. These are philosophical alone that says what is a valid means for knowledge. That is the only philosophical difference between various schools. And that spawned off so many discourses, debates, and things of this nature. And very important in our contemporary world when we talk about knowledge systems to understand that the Sanatana Dharma person, the one-line statement on the goal of life has been to seek knowledge. For the longest time in the Indian tradition, the goal of life was to dispel avidya about my existence. Who am I? What am I? Right? To understand that you're Brahman. That is the idea, to dispel that avidya. So we do that by the methods in the various sampradayas that we have, which follow certain darshanas. We follow these various pramanas and other such things, and we acquire knowledge. If not in this lifetime, maybe over multiple lifetimes, right? This is the way Indians saw the generation of knowledge, true knowledge. So Indians can be described as seekers because we are seeking. We are seeking knowledge. We are not believing. We are seeking. Believe means you're not applied any pramana. Right? You blindly believe whatever nonsense somebody tells you, you believe that. In contrast to that, the contemporary world uses Abrahamic thought in which the goal of life is to obey. The goal of life there is to follow a divine dictated law. The law is dictated to some prophet somewhere, or somebody said the only way to the Father is through the Son, and these kinds of things. And the goal of life is to say, this is the covenant that Moses has established. I'll believe these 10 commandments and go. Or I'll believe in these tenets and I'll be, that's what. So their goal in life is to follow this divine dictated law so that in the afterlife they'll be admitted to Jannat or heaven, or eternal damnation forever and ever in hell. So they can best be described as followers. For them, knowledge does not matter. All that matters is this. So we see that science flourished in India because of philosophy. When Abrahamic systems took root in the West, there is no scope for science. That is what we will see in this course over here. As long as ancient Greece had contact with India, they had science. But in 325 current era, the Roman Empire that had conquered the Greeks in 145 BCE, the Romans conquered the Greeks. And the Romans in 325 current era, they adopted Christianity. In the Nicene Council, Constantine adopted Christianity, and promptly they fell into dark ages because irrationality was ruling them, right? Only they had to believe, nothing more. So it became a theocracy. From cosmocentrism, it became a theocentric society, theology-centric. So till the so-called Enlightenment and rationalism, that was the state of Europe. And this is very important to understand for this course that I'm offering. And we have so much of evidence. For example, in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad by Yajnavalkya, he's saying, Ashatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityoma Ramratangamaya. From ignorance lead me to truth, from darkness to light. Clear evidence that this civilization is exalting seeking of truth as the goal of life. So given that, we can also talk about what is the antiquity of darshanas, because there are some today who say that these Indian philosophical systems came after contact with the Greeks. So the Greeks, Socrates' school and Aristotle and Plato, these are the guys, their philosophical systems were imported into India, giving rise to our own logical systems. This is the claim, right? So what are we seeing? We can see that Samkhyas mention the Rig Veda itself. So we put Samkhya right with Rig Veda. I'm not telling you the date of Rig Veda, I'm just putting it over there. Then we are seeing that Rishi Kannada is mentioning Samkhya and Mimamsa. So we put Vaisheshika after Samkhya and after Mimamsa. It does not mention Buddhism. So Buddha's got to be somewhat later. Buddha is using Nyaya Sutras. So that means Nyaya is before Buddha. Buddha in the Indian tradition, Puranic chronology should be placed to 1800 BC. We have evidences of these things also. So if we accept this as an anchor date, we can see how ancient this tradition of knowledge generation in India has been. So in Vaisheshika, the basis of our scientific methods, we got perception, external and internal, arising from sense and worldly objects, and internal through the mind. Anumana or inference is reaching new conclusion and truth from observations and previous truths by applying reason. Clear evidence of the scientific methodology over here. And Democritus, who's known to have visited India, he returned to Greece with something they refer to as natural philosophy. He's basically echoing Vaisheshika. We will study this in this course and show how there is evidence through various Greek thinkers who are espousing Indian philosophies over here, and Democritus is one of them. And we have got so many scientific works in India that are clearly guided by the darshanas, whether it's Nyaya Sutras, Surya Siddhanta, or Yukti Bhasha, or Siddhanta Shiromani. Just put a sampling over here. There's evidence of the use of perception, inference, logic. All that is evidence in the medical works, the mathematical works, astronomical works, all these kind of things. So with that as a brief understanding of epistemology in ancient India, establishing that India is an ancient civilization and we had these things, the next logical question is, did other old world civilizations also have a formal knowledge generation system, and what did it look like, right? So we know that there were several ancient civilizations, whether it is in India, in China, in Sumeria, in Mesopotamia, in Egypt, or in Greece, or in Africa. We know that there were ancient civilizations over here. So we want to talk about these really ancient ones, maybe up to 1000 BC or so. And we see Egyptian epistemology, right? They have religious entities as reference to abstract ideas. Very similar to India. Puranic literature is all metaphoric. When they use a divinity in a story, it's a metaphor for some knowledge system over there. I've shown that in my talks, right? So we see a similar kind of pedagogy that is there in Egypt also. And they always seek answers within established religious tradition. So they're very, very clear that it is not they're generating this knowledge. It has come from somewhere and they're strictly following this knowledge. That is what we see. Writing is upheld and they're syncretic. That is, they're open to ideas and they were inclusive. And we see from whether it is early dynasty, old, middle kingdom, all the way to late period, we study these things in this course and we look at the kind of knowledge systems they had. Mesopotamia, they had some preconditions for theory. First is imagination. When you see some randomness in nature, some phenomena, you first make a hypothesis. That is the imagination part of it, where you say, this is why that is happening. Then you use logic and causal relationships and observation to make sense out of that. This is Vaisheshika, in other words, right? You first try to observe it, external, internal, and then you try to make an inference based upon it. In Neo-Babylon, meaning after 400 to 500 BCE, the more mathematical the discipline, the more scientific it is. So we are seeing echoes of Indian thought in all of these things already. Chinese epistemology, almost everything is from India. In the Buddhist circuit, China got most of its knowledge over here, despite them having pretty ancient civilization. So their self-awareness is based on a holistic understanding of the world, very similar to the Indian way of looking at things. Unity of all cosmos, Brahman, self-awareness, and knowledge is a means of knowledge, is an important element of human existence, and they have got Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. They're three pillars of their society. Egyptian epistemology, we see the big three, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And Socrates did not leave writing, but then his student Plato wrote most of what his teacher taught him. And we see that almost all the philosophical movements in Greece owe their roots to Socrates. And we see the roots of Socrates' thought, we see the roots of Plato's thought, and we'll understand. For example, Plato said there are three sources of knowledge. Knowledge from senses. He does not consider this as real knowledge. He says knowledge through the mind or wisdom is the highest degree of knowledge. This is exactly Vaisheshika, right? So we are seeing Indian philosophies at the root of Greek philosophies itself. So with that, I'd like to now give summaries of knowledge systems and conclude this webinar with that. So the roots of medicine. We are seeing that the roots of medicine can be found in the Atharva Veda, which eventually led to Ayurveda itself. We see Charaka and Shushruta Samhitas are compendiums of Indic medical knowledge. Tremendous amounts of knowledge is available in these texts. And in this course, we address one or two lectures just on these things. The Mitannis, Hittites, Egyptians, and the Chinese were influenced by Indic systems from 2000 BC. Where is the evidence for that? We show that. We show the evidence of what were the events in India at that time that we can decipher from evidence in climatology and others that led to an outward migration of Indians to the Fertile Crescent and over there spreading Indian knowledge. And where is that evidence? What is it in the knowledge systems of Mitannis, Hittites, and Egyptians that make us claim that? All these things we'll study. Then we also show that medieval Europe depended on drugs from India, whether it was the Indo-Roman trade or even earlier, how they relied on drugs from India, and where is the evidence for that? Dioscorides, who wrote a 5-volume Materia Medica using drugs from India, used for 16 centuries in Europe. We will learn about these things. We will learn about how Arab medicine was based on Ayurveda since bin Qasim's invasion in 700 current era, how Ayurveda was a corpus of European knowledge all through the colonial era, taught in British medical schools in India till 1880, which was the core pharmaceutical methods. But after 1880, they stopped teaching Ayurveda. So we learned some of these things. Mathematics, we know that in India there is a huge citation trial through which we can establish the growth of mathematics, whether it's enumeration that is appearing in Rig Veda, mathematics of architecture in Baudhayana Sulba Sutra, mathematics of commerce, for example, in Arthashastra or Bakshali manuscript, the mathematics of modeling astronomy, whether it is in Surya Siddhanta, Aryabhata, and the advanced modeling, function approximation, polynomial series, all these things, whether it's Yukti Bhasha or other such works, we have a clear citation-based, evidence-based trial of the growth of this knowledge in India. So we see that math had origins in India, in Vedas of number systems, large numbers. Harappa, that shows archaeological evidence of standardization of measures, geometry principles. Baudhayana's Sulba Sutras, that shows knowledge of geometry. Bakshali manuscript showing algebraic solution of equations. Aryabhata with trigonometry, spherical geometry. Surya Siddhanta, intricate mathematics. Brahmagupta, Bhaskara the first and second, who add to this body of knowledge. Kerala school with Madhava and others greatly improved these things and developed calculus itself. In Yukti Bhasha, we have that evidence. Ramanujam in our own times to continue this tradition with deep insights and infinite series and other works. Astronomy, if you go to that field, we can show initially astronomical wisdom was embedded in stories in India, right? And this eventually gave way to Siddhantic astronomy. Many of these works are lost. Siddhantic astronomy is mathematical astronomy, right? We have citations to works that no longer exist, but because there are citations, we know they once existed. So many works are lost. There are math models to estimate the course of the sun, moon, and the planets. Evidence is there in Aryabhata, Surya Siddhanta's works. Estimation of precision called Ayana Chalana, Vriddhigarga, Varahamira, many others. Development of trigonometry, spherical geometry in Surya Siddhanta. Models to estimate eclipse, duration, length of shadows, Aryabhatiya. Estimation of the circumference of Earth, curvature, Brahmagupta. Gravity, Rigveda, Yajnavalkya, and many others. Models for partial heliocentrism, Nilakanta Somayaji, used later by Tycho Brahe. And the centers of learning were destroyed in Indian Muslim invasions. And one of the last great Indian classical astronomers was in Odisha, Patani Samanta Chandrasekhar, who lived in the turn of the 19th century, 20th century. We will learn about these things too. And if you look at the roots of astronomy, we see that what we call Jyotisha Shastra, what was it concerned with? It is concerned with cosmology, origins of the universe, cosmogony, life, earth studies, seasons, ayanams, astrometry, positions of nakshatras, planets, planetary studies on comets, orbits of planets, time studies on calendars, astral studies on predictive Jyotisha, mathematics to model celestial movements, And the tools they use are various yantras. There is a one-to-one correspondence modern astronomy, right? Modern astronomy also does cosmology to understand origins, astrometry for position of stars and planets, planetary science for comets, asteroids, exoplanets, stellar astronomy, life cycle of stars, galactic astronomy, astrophysics and physics of universe, astrobiology, exploration of life elsewhere. And what are the tools? We use telescopes, radio telescopes, space radiometry, and these things. If you look at the history, which I'm going to cover in this lecture series, we'll see from ancient India how this knowledge went out of the Fertile Crescent in 2000 BCE, then in Neo-Babylon in 600 BCE, in the Indo-Roman trade, the Siddhanta methods, that went 450 BC to 400 current era, then from Aryabhata, Brahmagupta and others, how it went to Islamic empires in 700 current era, and Bhaskara II's work also going to Islamic empire, and from there to Latin Europe, 10th to 12th century, then the Kerala school through the colonial period, going on to Europe, eventually building European body of knowledge. And when telescope was invented in the 17th century, it led to an explosion of what we call modern astronomy. There's a systematic way to study these things, and we will do that. So here are some samples of some colonial scholars and translators of Indian astronomy. For example, Cassini, Lee Gentle, Euler, Bailey, these guys, they discovered Indian astronomy for the second time. The first time was through the Greeks. Second time was through the Muslims. The third time directly when the colonial people took Sanskrit literature and translated them. So these initial translations were absolutely wowed by Indian astronomy, the antiquity, the knowledge contained in it, the mathematics. They were convinced that everything has come from India. But then when William Jones came along, the linguistic theory problem started. Aryan invasion issues, how ancient is the Indian civilization, 1500 BC Aryan invasion, all these notions came about, and everybody in a red font is against the antiquity of Indian astronomy, right? So that we learn all of these things in this course. Then we go to another body of knowledge, music. Earliest musical systems is from Samaveda. We are seeing three-tonal liturgical music gave way to 5-tone music, 7-tone music, 12 semitone scales, and to 22 Shruti system. Evidence is there in Chandogya Upanishad. We learn about these things. Bharatamuni's Nati Shastra, more discussion on that. Musical intervals, how the music scale itself was formed. Sa re ga ma pa da ni sa. How was that formed? Through chord ratios. We learn how mathematics plays a role in music over here. And Pythagoras, who has basically used the exact musical intervals found in India and methodologies and imported it to the West. He's the father of Western music. He used chord ratio based ratios also for music and other such things. We will study some of these things in this course. Roots of modern systems. Now, digital systems are at the root of everything in today's technological world, including the Zoom link that we are operating on. It's all based on digital systems, right? So digital systems have got things like logic gates, NOT gates, AND gates, and other such things. These are the root of our IC chips that are enabling these kinds of things. Whether we use computers, cell phones, and other things, it is the digital system dominating our life. Now, logic is there not only in Nyaya Sutras, we find them in Rig Veda itself, for example, in A and not A. This is an early expression of logic. Pingala and Chanda Shastra and his successors, they worked on combinatorics, which is working with integers and logic and truth tables and such things. And Colebrook is supposed to have made use of, he wrote a work on Indian logic in 1824, the translation of Indian logic into European languages. This work has influenced these two giants, George Boole and De Morgan. Boole is the person after whom Boolean algebra is named. So they were influenced by Indian logic to come up with their theories. And this is known to us through Boole's wife, Mary Everest Boole, who wrote a letter to Jagdish Chandra Bose saying the influence of Indian logic on these two gentlemen. Her grandfather was the person who was Everest, right? So through his Indian contacts, they got all these things. So I'm not saying that Indians invented chips or transistor. No, not at all. But I'm saying that the mathematics that is enabling these digital devices to work, the roots of that can be traced back to ancient India. That is what we see here. And it's an open secret that we had so many universities in India, brick and mortar universities, forest universities, and all of these things. Many of them were destroyed in Islamic invasions and eventually the British interventions. So the last part of this webinar is to show you a sample of how Indian knowledge has got out of India in various time frames, right? Because that's what completes the story. Once we establish that India is an ancient civilization, we show the accumulation of knowledge, we show the epistemology, we study other civilizations because it's not enough to study India. We need to study Egypt, we need to study Mesopotamia, Greece, China, and see what was their epistemology, what was their knowledge, what did they have. When we make the comparative study, a lot of aha moments come into picture. That's what I show in this course. So, the final part of the story here is to show how Indian knowledge has flowed out of India in various timelines, time frames. So, some of the earliest is pretty ancient. So, don't think I'm a flake when I say 50,000 years ago. There is evidence for certain knowledge systems that has gone out even in very ancient times, which is evident through genetic outflows and so on, all the way to 300 BCE. For example, through religion. This is a shaman culture that we can find in genetics, a common worldwide system over here. We had ancient trade routes, whether it's Pumpuhar, the underwater archaeology that shows 15,000 years ago to Cholas, in Lothal, from 5,000 years ago to 3,000 years ago, Harappa. All these areas show to us that there indeed was ancient contact between India and Mesopotamia and also on the east. And we have Vedic records of migration to the west. That is why we have linguistic affinity of European languages to Sanskrit. Rather than into India, we have evidence of out of India. We know about the Saraswati era climate change that induced migration in 2000 BC. We learn about that. I'll talk about evidence from cattle genomics, from Egyptian medicine, from various areas. I'll talk about these things. The Mitannis, Hittites, Elamites, Canaanites, Babylonian contacts, the Minoan and Mycenaean periods in Greece. We'll talk about that in addition. We'll talk about the travel of Greek scholars to India, Pythagoras, Democritus, Pyrrho, many other scholars who came to India, took this knowledge and went. This we will use resources of the West. We'll find Western Roman historians who have talked about these people getting their knowledge from India and other such places. We'll talk about that. Evidence comes from various things like genetic migrations, mtDNA and such things. Then in the second era, after Alexander, 300 BC to 100 BC, we know that there was Indo-Greek Empire, the Greek Empire, Seleucid Empire, all the way from Turkey to India over here. This formed a conduit for knowledge transmissions, and we will examine various things over here that will talk to us about what kind of knowledge, who are the people who took that knowledge. Then we have the Silk Road. So that's at least from 300 BC, if not earlier, connecting an informal trade network from Southeast Asia to China to Central Asia to India to Arabia to Mediterranean lands. And we will talk about how knowledge was transmitted, Indian knowledge is transmitted, and where is the evidence for this. We'll talk about these things. Then we know the Indo-Roman trade route, at least from 200 BC to 500 current era, when Roman sailors would come from the Red Sea to India, trade over here, go back, and then cross a land bridge to Alexandria and go back to their ports over here. We will talk about this and we'll show various evidences that talk about this. Then the Muslim transmissions from at least 700 current era, when Sindh was conquered by bin Qasim, up to 1600 current era. We'll talk about the Abbasid Caliphate and how Indian knowledge, what Indian knowledge, we'll talk about mathematics, we'll talk about Al-Fazari, Al-Ghazali, we'll talk about many of the Ibn Sina and other Arab people who translated Indian works like Charaka Samhita, Surya Siddhanta, Brahmagupta's Brahmasputa Siddhanta, all these kind of works. They were translated in Baghdad into Arabic and Persian, and they were injected into all the Muslim lands, whether it is in Arabia, Egypt, in Tunisia, Morocco, up to southern Spain. These Indian works are available in these places. And from here, it has been transmitted into northern Spain, which is Christian, right? Translation from Arabic into Latin. We know that too. So here are some of these people I talked to you about, how transmissions have happened in various time frames. We learn about this. How in Baghdad there's a house of wisdom by Caliph Harun al-Rashid that worked on translating Sanskrit, Greek works into Arabic. And we will learn what were these works that we're translating here and what happened to that. We'll learn about that. Then we will also learn how it went to Europe, right? How Indian knowledge initially went to the Greeks and Romans, but was destroyed when Roman Empire Christianized and the pagan libraries were destroyed by them, what they call pagan at least. But these works survived in Tunisia, in all the former Roman lands, inherited by the Muslims when this area became Islamic. They also got knowledge destructively from India, consolidated all of this knowledge, injected it into northern Spain in through translation schools in Latin as well as in Sicily. Sicily also there were translation schools that were translating these Indian works and other works into Latin, and that was diffused into Europe at that time frame. So at a time when when Europe was under theocracy, which was backward, primitive, dark ages, and things of this nature under feudal systems, they were slowly enriching their knowledge through Indian works. That is what is going on, leading the stage to the so called Renaissance, to the so called scientific revolution, and other such things. So that is what we learn in Toledo. Where are the translation schools? Who are the people who are translating? What were they translating? All these things we will take a look with evidence. In Italy, there were translation schools. We'll learn about this. And we will also learn about European scholars who came directly to India, whether it's Marco Polo, John of Monte Carvino, whether it is Jordanus Catalani, whether it's Nicola da Conti, Alfonso Nikitin, or the colonialist. We will learn about direct European transmissions to this era. So what I will show in this course is this knowledge transfers from India in every time period, in every geography. I will show to you with evidence how knowledge has gone out of India to these various cultures, setting the stage for our modern knowledge systems. And in conclusion for today's webinar, Indian deep history, this is a term that I use for Indian history, not prehistory, not proto-history, it is deep history. It is utterly wrong what we are learning in schools and universities. 5 agencies are enforced their ideologies, whether it's colonial, Eurocentric, missionary, socialist, or Marxist. We have strong evidence to uphold the antiquity of the Indian civilization, and all this is covered in the first course. It is not necessary to know these things for the second course, but in the second course, we start from the point that given that India is an ancient civilization, do we have evidence of knowledge systems? Like I gave an overview in today's seminar, we will first show that we have a well-developed epistemology that shows great antiquity, well-developed mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and the roots of knowledge system in India. And we will also show how knowledge systems seeded the world, right, in various periods of time. And we'll conclude by showing how it's an unacknowledged history that needs revision. So this is the course, and it starts on July 20th. I think Ankur will talk a little bit more about this. So feel free to ask your questions and we can discuss more on this. Okay, I'll stop sharing over here and we can open it up for questions.
Great. Yeah. Okay, let's see. We have a hand up. And let me just get that poll going right away and see if you're interested in this course. It's going to be on Sundays at the same time. So please, if you can make this webinar, maybe it fits into your schedule. It's definitely worth building your schedule around. Very interesting. And as Dr. Vidham has said, 5 iterations. I think I was in the second or third batch. And it was just amazing to go through it. And, like in this one webinar, you went through it, each slide, you mentioned it, but taking a whole class session to dive deep into each of them and still amazing to see how much information you've accumulated, and you make it accessible, you share it, you give that overview, and it's just an exciting set. It's exciting to know all of this. I feel it, unlocks this ability to speak with confidence about where we come from and all these other things that we know is fishy. Starting with Columbus came to India just for the spices. What else was he after, right? Considering what else happened, and who sent him and all that other history that starts really unraveling very quickly once you start having this. So there we go. Who else has their hand up in the attendance window? Nobody actually. So if you have a question, you can in the Q&A box, can you please share more details on the Friends of HUA? Yeah, we can get into that in a little bit. Let's ask Dr. Vedam some questions so far. And one of these things, again, as Hindu University of America, we're trying to, you said, I described it better. You said pioneer. We're pioneering this field, and the language we use and the courses we teach with the students that participate, we continue to develop and lead the field. So there's a lot of other people in this field. Dr. Vedam, why don't you talk about some of the higher level stuff in terms of who else is working on it, where we are, and how you're positioning all of these courses, the retreats at HUA to bring people in and share this information. And yeah, in the meantime, people, please ask your questions in the Q&A box.
Yeah, I don't know what to say on that one, Ankur. So yes, there are a lot of people who are working on related areas. Many of my good friends too in these, and it is the overall efforts of many people in this field that we are able to reclaim our civilization. There's so much about our civilization that has been beaten down, destroyed, suppressed, distorted, and it is up to our new generations to do a deep study and say, excuse me, we are not what you say we are. There is so much more to this civilization, to our ancestors, and this is the correct way to look at them. So there are many people who are working on this, people like Vedvi Rarya, Subhash Kak, Rajiv Malhotra, and many other giants and luminaries are working on these areas. And we need to study their works, everybody's work, their methodologies, their data, everything gives us new insights, new ways to look at the Indian civilization.
Nice. Thank you. I know that was a big question. Just it's a lot out there. So, Purushottamji, yeah, I'll maybe send you a link for the scholarship. Maybe if you qualify, we can help you enroll. Glad that you're interested. Vijay Kane says, listening to Dr. Rhythm is like trying to drink water from a fire hose. It's best to take the course. There's a lot of information, and those slides are, yeah, each bullet point is deep. You know, the
Yes.
deep history that you're talking about. There's so much there. Can we take the course directly without taking the first one? Yes, yes. Dr. Vedam has gone through that, and maybe there's some. It's going to be on the HUA learning management system. Dr. Vedam can upload some readings that can give you some context, and week by week, you will have the opportunity to watch videos, to read the originals, to read textbooks, do this kind of deep history and research, which is really necessary. And so, Dr. Vedam, I'm glad that this is the fifth time you're offering this, and there's momentum behind it, you know, and the
Right.
way that you're expanding it, it's just really good. And I hope this next batch can take it to the next level. Dilip Madan is asking, I don't know, a philosophical question or something. Did Euclid exist?
That's a good question. And you have to read C.K. Raju. C.K. Raju has done a deep study on this character that we refer to as Euclid and provided evidences that there cannot have been a single person called Euclid. And he's tried to trace who in the Western intellectual space was capable of writing some of the things that is possible. He also tries to place a time period when the works attributed to Euclid might have been done. The work called Elements, that today we is passed off as ancient Greek geometry and others, he says, he meaning C.K. Raju, says that it's probably done around the 10th to 13th centuries in Europe after the fall of Byzantine Empire. After the fall of, a slightly later period. After the fall of Byzantine Empire, it was a great blow to the Western people when Mehmet, the Muslim, he conquered Constantinople, became Istanbul and other such things. So the Greek scholars, Byzantine scholars, they migrated from there and went to Western Europe. Basically, they went to Italy. They landed in places of commerce, places like Milan, Venice, all of these kind of places. And they took their knowledge systems with them. And they wanted to show that there was ancient Greek knowledge also that surpassed what they were learning from translations of Indian works through the Muslims into Latin. They wanted to show that. So C.K. Raju makes a very strong point to show that this character called Euclid is fictional, and many of those works are Indian.
All right, CBSG, go ahead, Chaudhry Patel.
Just two questions. Of course, one of the comment, the Dr. Vedam, the amount of knowledge you put in 1 hour, I was so scared that it may take me 3 generations to understand the whole thing. It is so exhaustive, so expensive. I don't know how you collected all this thing, and I doubt I can understand and retain and sustain in 3 courses. It is so much. That is my comment. Second thing is that when you ask in the beginning, ask them who should ask them to change their false narrative. I mean, you right in the beginning, you were saying, ask them who to ask and why they are going to admit their mistake and how they are going to change what is taught in the European, American, Australian
Right.
system.
Right. There's nobody to ask here because Adhikara has been taken away, like I said, right? Adhikara is taken away from us. The minute we try to say, here are the changes to the history, we are pigeonholed as fascist, Hindutva, saffron, Nazi, and all these kind of things because they want to delegitimize any scholarship that challenges their established narratives, right? This is what we see happening, whether it's in Rutgers University or whether it is in Witzel at Harvard and other such places. We are seeing this effort at delegitimization. That is what is going on, demonization and so on. So you're right. It's right now is an ideological battle where on one side they want to prop up opinions and their narratives of the Western civilization. A new breed of scholars has come up that is wants analytical evidence-based understanding of history. On this side, they're ill-equipped to understand this kind of thing. On this side, we are seeing people who are not formal historians like me. I'm an engineer scientist. We use new methods to come and analyze this. So there is no way they can deal with this. The one way they're dealing with it is delegitimize us, right? So what we should do is continue to offer courses like this, educate more and more people about the evidence, write books, articles, have conferences, and influence our lawmakers to try and revise our textbooks. So these are happening. It'll take time. We need to build more and more momentum. Your being in this webinar itself is evidence that you're participating in this journey. And so it's important that we strengthen this journey, that to join the course and try to learn these facts and try to push it in your circles. So more and more people are influenced by these ideas.
I think we should first correct the Indian universities who are still teaching the Western knowledge.
Right, right. So every year I go to India twice and I offer I visit about 10 cities or so and different universities I give talks. I'm going this August also. I'll visit 2 universities where I'm offering talks in Hyderabad. So yes, I continue to do that. Engagement continues. The good news is people are open to listening, but we'll have to see how far these ideas will be taken up.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
That's
you.
awesome. I didn't know, Dr. Vidham, you're going to be in India giving talks at different universities. Maybe we can partner with them a little bit. Maybe they'd be interested in taking this course too. Maybe we can
Yes.
follow up on that. CBSG, thank you so much. Always appreciate you, and hopefully see you at the sometime soon in a class or at an event. Um,
One more comment to the question just asked. So the issue was it's too complex. There's so much material over here. So this is going to be spread over 10 lectures. So each lecture of mine takes approximately 1.5 hours with 30 minutes for Q&A. So the classes are about 2 hours long. So there's ample time, although there's also a lot of material. There's a lot of time to examine the evidence, discuss these things little by little. I had to rush through 1 hour to give you an overview and a flavor for these things, but we will go in detail on these things. And the very first lecture would be a recap of the previous term, and that will help to set the stage also.
great. Seshji, go ahead.
नमस्ते
Namaste.
अंकुर जी नमस्ते वेदम जी I think it was in the pandemic when we were at home doing nothing. This was one of the best opportunities that came across. I mean, without any planning. And I had taken this course. It's awesome, awesome, awesome. I don't know what else to say. Please take so you can, if you don't know your history, you don't know who you are. So take the course, learn about yourself, your history, preserve it for the future. And I don't know what else to say. This is a great course. Only you will know that you missed it if you didn't take it. I mean, if you took it, you would know what you missed. So taking it is the best way to go. Dhanyavad. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the endorsement, Sheshaji. Thank you so
No, no,
much.
no. It was wonderful. I always get mind boggled by the course. Every time I hear the webinar, I said, oh my good Lord, I have still a long way to go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, you go ahead.
Okay, Dr. Vedam, there's one thing I noticed I've been kind of trying to focus on. You touched upon many other areas, but one thing you did not touch upon was architecture and civil engineering. And I think that is a very, very critical area because India has many very old, remarkably intricate structures,
Right,
marvels of engineering. I mean, these include, for example, structures like the Madurai Meenakshi Temple and thousands of similar structures all over the country.
right.
It is literally inconceivable that such structures could be built without a highly advanced system of engineering, complete with manuals, this, that, and the whole 9 yards.
Right.
I did touch upon that. And one other aspect I should point out.
Let me address that first and you take
Go
the
ahead.
second question. So yes, that is, you're right. It is a very important area and the good news is we do cover it. In this course, we do cover the civil engineering, architectural aspects of these things, the application of mathematics, how geometry is used and all these things. There are talks that are given also that are available publicly on these things. You can go to the talks given to ASEI, American Society of Engineers of Indian Origin, where I've given a series of talks on engineering legacy of ancient India, where we've addressed some of these things. So this course, we have only 10 lectures of 2 hours each, 20 hours. So I'm going to pack as much as I can into this, but ideally this should be spread out into about, I don't know, maybe 2 terms or 3 terms, but we will cover it. Go ahead to the second question.
No, the second question, see why I thought this is of prime importance is that this word, I think we can generally agree if you look at the prototypical attacks on Hinduism, which is particularly from the West and from the quote unquote, this one, the lefties and Harvard and many other universities, there is a tremendous amount of what has come to be known as wokeism. And they essentially categorize the entire caste system. Hinduism is conflated with caste system,
Right.
and they say it's the 4 castes. But then you look at it and you think, just pause for a minute. The Brahmins were supposedly the professors, the guys who sat back in this one and taught and wrote books and all that kind of stuff. They were not the people who went out to the streets. They were not the people who went into the field to construct, to beat up the stones, to make sculptures. So, in other words, a temple like Madurai Meenakshi could never have been built by the Brahmins. I think we can agree on that.
So, what you called as caste, I reject the notion of caste, by the way.
So
And
do I.
in this course, when we take up the medical knowledge of India, I make the novel claim that what is this origin of what the West has put as ritual purity, pollution, discrimination, immobile, hierarchical. We analyze all these things in light of what I'm calling for the public health and other such things. It's a novel idea, but we do cover it to show the spuriousness of what is positioned as caste. In addition to that, Kalyan Viswanathan also offers a course here at HUA on caste. So yes, we address this inverted quotes caste in various ways at HUA, in my course and Kalyan's course and others.
See, Dr. Vedam, I've done both of Kalyan Viswanathan's course. And this area, I think, is something that needs attention. For example, highlight some of the most successful, quote unquote, Shudra engineering scholars, Shudra architectural scholars. They've got to be. There simply has to be because it can't be any other way.
I can give you one big name right now. If you like, I can give you one very big name right now.
Please go ahead, and I'd also like to know more.
It is Aryabhata. Aryabhata should be spelt with two T's or one T.
Okay.
In Marxist books, he spelled with two T's. But if you download the book called Aryabhatiya by William Clark, remember the name William Clark, it's available on Google. Who was William Clark? 1935, he was a professor of Sanskrit at Harvard. In those days, study of Sanskrit was very important. So he was a professor in that area and he translated Aryabhatiya into English. In the foreword, he spent about maybe 5 to 6 pages on how should Aryabhata be spelt. Should he be spelt with two T's or with one T? And he gives us reasoning for that. If he spelt with two T's, Bhatta means he's a Brahmin. He's got access to the highest wisdom, Jyotisha wisdom, not surprising. But he provides the evidence why she spelled it one T, Bhatta, which implies he's in the servant category, a working class servant category kind of person who had access to the highest wisdom and whose works we follow even today. So it's just one example of this nonsense that is peddled at us, that there is something called caste. Only the upper caste had got access to wisdom, lower castes are suppressed, all this nonsense. So we have a lot of counterexamples for that. Aryabhatta is one name many people are unaware of. But do your research. In this course, I'll help you to do the same.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, very good. Okay. The poll is up. If you don't see it, please minimize and maximize. Find it, let us know. If you're interested in this course starting next Sunday. If you're interested in enrolling in a certificate or a degree program, both of Dr. Vedam's courses are part of the certificate program in Hindu Studies, where it's not just a one-off course where you get hit with so much information and you don't know what to do with it. It's a structured program that helps you contextualize Hindu civilization. And you get to have classes with people like Dr. Vedam, with Kalyanji, with other faculty. And Dr. Vedam's amazing, and he's one of our many wonderful and amazing faculty that teach different subjects that you may be particularly interested in. So this one is, uh, if you're hungry for the information and you've been wondering where to get it, this is the course. Dr. Vedam, in this 20 hours, as he said, he's packed in so much information. And then the people that you take the class with, your classmates, the questions that they ask, the way that you engage on a weekly basis, please join. You won't regret it. It'll be a great experience. Give it as a gift to somebody else who, if you've already taken it, get somebody else to take the course. And we can call it a gift scholarship or something like that. But let's make sure that this next batch for Dr. Vedam is a nice big group of students who can take this forward and be a part of our a growing family. So with that, let me just let you remind you that the link is in the chat. It's going to be right there. You can click and register. The poll is up. And let me give it to Dr. Vedam for some more. So your take on it and maybe another pitch.
So yes, I have nothing more to add over here, Ankur. So thanks for organizing it, and thank you for everybody for your attending and your questions. So I hope to see you all in this course, and you're all ambassadors. If you take this course, ambassadors for this, you'll be able to counter some of the nonsense. The few slides I put up in the beginning on Eurocentric claims, and this is something that a whole lot of ignorant people keep spouting. They take this received wisdom of colonialists, and it is the basis of their arguments, whether on social media or elsewhere. You'll be able to counter many of that with facts over here, saying the reality is elsewhere. So let us start this journey. So hope to see you all in that course. Thank you.
Thank you. Dhanyawad, everybody. Namaste.
Namaste.